We're on the record. The hearing board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is in session. Today is Thursday, September 19th, 2019. The time is just after 9 o'clock a.m., and we are meeting in Diamond Bar in the hearing board room. We have one matter on the hearing board calendar for today, and that is South Coast AQMD versus Weber Metals, Inc., case number 6136-1 for a modification of the order for abatement. And this matter was meant to be on consent, but there were some questions that remained, and so the parties have come today to hear this on the regular calendar. And we were waiting, and Senator, take your time. We were waiting for our final member of the hearing board, and so I just wanted to swear in any witnesses who wish to testify in this matter today. Please rise to be sworn in if you wish to testify today. If you may testify, please rise. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. We got started a little bit early just because the key witness will be gone in an hour, so we want to make sure we ask all questions. Before we begin, however, there are two members of the hearing board who were not present at the original hearing. And so first, Dr. Bernstein, I'm going to ask you if you had an opportunity to review the materials and the prior hearing, and are you prepared to rule today?
Yes.
Okay. He answered yes. And Mr. Copeland, same question for you.
Yeah, I reviewed the original hearing. I watched the tape and reviewed the paperwork, and I think I am ready.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're not going to spend too much time going over openings yet. We'll do that once we have gone through any additional testimony, if we need to do that, of Mr. I'm sorry, I'm going to make sure I get your name correct. Mr. Schran. Mr. Schran has a plane to catch. But let's mark exhibits first, make sure we have all of that done. Believe we're on, for respondent, I believe we're on exhibit B as in boy. And so we're going to mark, again, this originally came in as a consent calendar matter, so we're going to put into evidence those things which the parties have already requested to be in evidence, and we'll go from there. So first I just want to mark the stipulation regarding consent calendar that we all received, and we'll mark that as exhibit B. And in there, the parties have they did agree to place it on consent, but they also agreed to place into evidence, which we will do now, the declaration of Nicholas Schran, and we'll mark that, the original declaration, as exhibit C, as in Charlie. There also was a supplemental stipulation regarding consent calendar, which was in regard to the supplemental declaration of Mr. Schran. So the stipulation, supplemental stipulation, we will mark as D, as in dog. And then the supplemental declaration itself, we will mark as E, as in egg. We also received 3 other documents. I'm going to mark them. We have a red line version of the proposed order on modification, and I will mark that as F, as in Frank. And we have a clean version of the same findings and decision proposed for the modification, and that will be G, as in George. And finally, we received an email from Mr. Thayard with regard to the reason why we're here today. And we're going to mark that email as, it's a one-pager, as Exhibit H. And with that, Mr. Thayard, if you could introduce Mr. Schran and just have him reintroduce his title for the record and indicate that I did see that he took the oath today.
Thank you. And thank you to the members of the board. My name is Olivier Thayard on behalf of Weber Metals. My witness here today is Mr. Nicholas Schran. He is at Weber Metals, and he will reintroduce himself. Mr. Schran, did you take the oath to tell the truth today?
Yes, I did.
And can you remind the board what your position or title is at Weber Metals?
I am the construction project manager for Weber Metals for the 1430 project, as we call it, and my name is Nicholas Schron.
Thank you. And with that, I will eschew any opening statement at this time because I know that the board is interested in asking this witness questions, so I'll defer any further time.
Thank you, and I'll start questions because it was really my question that had prompted this. I had noticed that in the original declaration, there was no mention of whether in condition 2, so everybody is oriented, we're looking at condition 2 of the order, and Mr. Schran, you had indicated that there was compliance, but not that there had been installation of the HEPA control system. And we had a follow-up declaration saying that that was in fact installed. Can you please tell us, well, let's start with what is the current state of that filter, that HEPA control system, and is it operating?
So the current state of the HEPA control system that we installed is fully operational. It is powered on at all times, and venting building A1 anytime grinding is being done.
Thank you. And can you explain, just explain so that I can feel comfortable in everything else that's in the declaration and we can move forward, why the original declaration was dated September 12th and September 10th was the date by which the installation and operation was required. Can you explain why that was not in the declaration and what happened and what the date and timing was?
So Olivier provided me the declaration document prior to the 10th, and I didn't sign it until the 12th to send it to you guys, and I did not go back and check every detail to make sure that it had been changed from will be operational by the 10th to is installed and ready to use.
Thank you. And Mr. Thayard did, which is what I had originally thought, but then it got a little more confusing, correct? Mr. Thayard, in Exhibit H, attempted to explain what had happened and the timing. However, of course, that is not evidence. So if you could explain what date the installation was completed and what day the operation, what day the HEPA filter and system went into operation, and why or why not if it was timely.
Okay, so the install of the system was actually done prior to receiving the permit to construct. I signed the rental contract, I believe, back in May, April or May, and it's been sitting at the facility hooked up since. So the confusion that I had was that the way that I read the order and understood the permitting process, understood that I'm a construction guy, not a air permitting guy. So some of this is somewhat unclear to me. But the way I understood condition 2 was that the blower needed to be installed, working, ready to use within 14 days after the permit to construct was received, and it was. So that was that was what I had originally declared.
Okay. And the confusion was that you did not understand. What was the confusion?
The confusion was that I didn't understand, just by how I read the language in condition 2, that it actually needed to be operational. And I did not understand that until you asked your question on Friday afternoon, the 12th, I think, whatever day Friday was.
Can you, so what date was it actually turned on?
I turned it on as soon as I got into work on Monday, the 15th.
16th.
16th.
And does the facility operate over the weekend?
It does occasionally. I'm not sure if it was operational over the weekend, this particular weekend.
Okay. You were at the last hearing, is that correct?
Yeah.
And did you hear Mr. Pearson testify?
Yes.
Okay. I went back and I went over because I wanted to make sure there was an understanding, and I went back and I viewed the hearing. Mr. Pearson was the witness who had testified with regard to the conditions of the order and what they meant and what the facility had promised to do. Do you know why Mr. Pearson was not involved in making sure that the control equipment was operational 14 days after, or just that condition 2 was followed through on properly? Can you remind us, who is Mr. Pearson, and
So Mr.
what is his position regarding?
Mr. Pearson is our environmental consultant. He's a third party to Weber Metals.
Okay, so he would not be from day to day?
No.
Okay. All right, so because Mr. Pearson had explained very clearly with regard to what the permit shield was and what it did not cover, and that condition 2, and there was only one permit, so he clearly understood it. But it's your testimony today that you truly did not understand that you could turn it on with a permit to construct.
Correct. Usually the way I've dealt with other things that I've installed with AQMD permits is that I get a permit to construct, I build it, do any testing that you guys require, and then operate it once I get the permit to operate. So I was confused on how this was different, or didn't think it was different.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any questions with regard to that condition or anything else that Mr. Strand might be able to answer at this time? Mr. Palagopalan?
Mr. Schrein, I wanted to go over why we are here today, actually. What is the issue that is causing the delay, and if you can explain, what the sequence of events that's happened.
Which delay are you referring to?
Because of the billet grinder.
Oh, okay.
And the control for that. And that's the reason I'm here today asking an extension, because you can't comply with the date.
Can I ask a question right before that? It's more general.
Right.
And I want to make sure I'm getting this correctly. The HEPA filter for condition number 2 is a totally separate HEPA filter unit than what we're talking about for why we're here.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure I had that straight. Okay.
As far as the delay on the billet grinding, we were well on track to complete the project ahead of schedule with all the controls that we explained to you guys last time we were here. We had actually installed the wet dry dust collector with the HEPA filtration in July, I believe, and we in the process of turning that on and getting it commissioned, it didn't work. Long story short, all the seals leaked, the unit vibrated like crazy, and it just, in general, wasn't doing what it was supposed to do.
So then, now when you say wet dry, can you explain a little bit about the wet and the dry process? What's involved in that?
Yeah, so it's a custom-built collector by a company called Dual Draw that they made for us, and it's got a wet scrubber followed by a mist eliminator section, post-filter, and then HEPAs.
So there's no bag house out before the HEPA?
There's not.
No. So then the issue was with the collector or with the connections and you say there were a lot of leaks?
So it's one inclusive unit. It's only one piece. So the seals on the unit were leaking smoke. There was smoke coming out of the exhaust stack, and then the building also filled up with smoke. So it just, in general, none of it worked as we thought it would.
Now this, refresh memory, it's a traveling billet grinder, so
Correct.
this is not, and normally how big are the billets, the diameter?
Anywhere from, they're usually square, and they're anywhere from 8 to 18 inches square cross-section.
And the the grinder travels back and forth?
Correct.
How long are they typically,
Between 4 and 10 feet.
So the unit travels back and forth, so the control is on,
It's a hood that is attached to the grinder cab. So as the grinder moves back and forth, the hood follows along with the grinder.
So are they leaks at the collection itself, or?
No, it was the dust collector, not the hood or the ducting inside the building.
Okay, so it was collecting properly, but at the dust collector, it was not
Filtering.
filtering. And have you figured out what the issue is, what the problem, why it wasn't working?
The Austin company, which is the design firm that we hired to provide and install the unit, is still trying to finish their root cause analysis, but they think there was a couple factors involved.
So what's your proposal moving forward on that?
So we have done a couple things already. We actually removed the wet unit because it wasn't controlling the emissions, and replaced it with the old cyclone unit that we previously had on the building, because at least that one didn't have any visible emissions and was meeting the 0.002 grains per dry square cubic foot that's in the 1430 requirement. So we removed the wet one because it did have visible emissions, and put back the old dry one that worked. And then the future plan is to come up with a new system that will work.
Wet-dry combination, or just dry?
Probably just dry this time.
And do you have to get the fire department approval on that?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Now, where's the HEPA in this unit,
In the dry unit,
the dry unit?
it would be an after filter on a kind of a module on the back after the cartridge filters.
Up to the cartridge filter. And you said, so was testing done, you said it complied with the 0.002 standard? So you did testing on the existing unit before the,
Sorry, I thought you were asking about the new unit. The existing unit does not have HEPA filters.
the new unit.
Okay.
But over the reconfiguration,
Yes.
do you have the HEPA, right? No.
The reconfigured old unit does not have
Does
HEPA.
not have HEPA. So, but you said, you mentioned that you tested the old unit.
Yes.
And the test showed you complied with the 0.002
Correct.
standard?
Correct.
And do you have a copy, or do you have a summary of the report that shows the compliance?
I have it in an email on my computer, but I don't have it.
Let me stop, let me
It was
stop.
provided to the district,
Oh,
Oh.
prior to this.
I believe. Or
I was going to say, we're getting in, which I think is good, and we should, but we're getting into the, to the content of what they're asking to postpone the hearing until October 30th about, but I wanted to hear, I do want to hear more, but I'm wondering if at this particular moment, Mr. Thayard, if you would like to frame the issue for us for today, briefly, before we come back to some more questions for Mr. Schran, but if we could do it briefly, just so we could get to questions for Mr. Schran, and then, I don't know, Ms. Sue, if you'd like to also give a brief opening as well on the district's position. And in particular, I think I'm very interested in knowing, since what you're asking for us to modify today is simply that date to October 31st, I believe, but 30th. 30th. But in reality, all we're doing really is we're continuing the hearing. You know you're not going to be in compliance. So I think we want to hear a little bit framing about why we're waiting so long to have a hearing on this. And then we can come back to the specific questions, if that's okay, Mr. Balagopalan. Okay, so Mr. Thayard.
Yes, thank you. So first, one thing I wanted to mention as to Mr. Schran's testimony, you had raised the question of, shouldn't Mr. Pearson have, evaluated this properly? Part of the confusion that Mr. Schran had is, honestly, this is part of why I sent the email, my fault. I assumed install and operation, and I just made an assumption that my client knew it was both. And then as soon as I got the information, I went back and we're like, oh no. Okay, let's just be clear. It meant that it had to be switched on too. So that.
I appreciate that. And hearing from Mr. Schran,
That's part of my mistake as well. In terms of what we're seeking today, so we filed our petition seeking an extension of time. At the time we submitted our petition, we were not sure how much time we needed. It became clear when the hearing was set, especially when it was set for the 19th, that there was not going to be a possibility of knowing a date certain by which we could actually comply with the titanium billet grinding center by the 19th. In open and transparent communication with the district, what we had agreed to do was seek an interim relief for 1 month with a stipulation that we would come back on October 30 to be able to provide that date certain. The reason why a date certain cannot be provided today is because, number one, as our esteemed engineer member who is getting into the weeds on this appropriately had noted, one of the things that's required if they're going to move to a dry system, which seems to be the likely thing, is fire department approval. The fire department is engaged on this. In fact, early results are that the fire department's probably going to approve a dry system. Once they do, that will spark some engineering. But the timing of all that, although it's being pushed as hard by Weber, we don't know exactly when that's going to be. We can't control the fire department, but we have emails from them that we'd be ready to present. So we don't know a date certain. And we also wanted to make sure that we were able to provide the best testimony we could as to everything that the company has been doing to try to develop a new system, what went wrong. Weber relied on a design firm that is stepping up now to try to get it right, but clearly there was a design error. And so more time was needed, and given that the 19th was coming up very quickly, Ms. Sue and I said, let's go this on consent. Let's get a 1-month interim plan, as long as we promise to the hearing board that we will come back on the 30th to get a date certain.
Thank you, Mr. Thayard. And Ms. Sue, do you have any opening that you wish to give?
Yes, the evidence submitted shows the facility needs additional time to engineer the new air pollution control for its titanium billet grinding center. So just with this short amount of time with another hearing, at the next hearing, they could propose a timeline. And at that point in time, the district and the hearing board can ask very detailed questions regarding the proposed timeline, the proposal, why they need the time that they do need. And this month and a half will give them time to get all that information.
Thank you.
Can I just amend one quick brief thing? I wanted to alert the board, and I alerted this to Ms. Sue as well. One of the things that the facility is looking at, just to be open and transparent, is whether or not this issue with the billet grinder may have a cascading effect on, it's a 3-part project. The aluminum repair and the titanium swing. That's still being looked at in terms of schedule. I just wanted to flag that. I have way too premature to give information as to dates on that, but as I told Ms. Sue this week, it's possible that we may need to evaluate the timeline as well as to aluminum repair for that hearing on the 30th, which we'd be ready to talk about.
Thank you. I just wanted to state for the record, which I meant to do at the very beginning of the hearing, that generally speaking, I did go against my better judgment in allowing a modification request for an order for abatement to remain on consent. I think generally speaking, modifications have a lot more questions involved in them and a lot more evidence. So we probably are in the place we should have been, which is at a hearing. And just for the future, that's not generally my thinking. I know, Mr. Balagopalan, you had a lot of questions, but I definitely want to ask while Mr. Schran is here, it just, especially given, and thank you for your transparency, Mr. Thayard, which I think we all thought in the back of our heads, there may be a cascading effect. Why, I know this occurred on August 30th, is that correct? That it was put into, that the system that now is not working was originally put into operation? Do I have that wrong?
That was the end of July.
Oh, the end of July. Okay, so the failure happened, what was the date that you knew, and you pulled it off and put back in the old system?
I don't recall the exact date. I can
Was it in August?
That we restored the old system? Yes.
Okay, so given that you've already been at least a month in on the root cause analysis, And now essentially, it's not really a month extension. It's really a month and a half that we're waiting to hear even more. Do you really need all that time, or could we come in earlier than that for a hearing so that we can set into motion everything that will probably cascade from there?
My understanding is that they're very close to finishing their root cause analysis. There's been a lot of back and forth with the provider and manufacturer of the dust collector about fault, and it's I think it probably does go deeper than just a design error. So we're getting close to having the root cause analysis done. We probably could have it done by the end of September. But my understanding was that this was the only day we could do the hearing, so that's why we were asking for extension.
I think the root cause analysis is a piece of it, but I think there's also concern about permitting, because the root cause then means how is the new design going to go?
Yeah.
How is the fire department going to approve it? We are open to trying to have a hearing earlier. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but I do think it's going to be a substantial amount of work that's going to be going on in the next 45 days. And I worry that I just don't want to be in the position of having a hearing and telling you,
We don't know.
I don't know yet what the date is. And then now that this emerging issue has arisen with aluminum, but there's no request for relief needed yet for aluminum because the deadline for that's not till the end of December. So there's no there's no non-compliance that's breathing down their neck right now. So I'm open to a hearing before the 30th, but I'm concerned that that's not going to be sufficient time to get all the ducks in a row on a completely redesigned system that is apparently needed.
Okay. And I took it from Mr. Balagopalan, so did you have additional questions for Mr. Schran? Thank you.
And I do want to say, if there are more questions on engineering, although Mr. Schran has to leave, Ms. Queen Uchekwe is also available and doesn't know quite as much as Mr. Schran, but she knows maybe more about other things that you might have questions on. So,
Actually, it's my confusion now. The HEPA that was discussed earlier, that was building A1, that's different from the titanium building, so that's two separate issues. So that's sort of settled in a sense.
Correct.
I think,
And condition 2 was meant as an interim measure to reduce emissions.
right, for building A1, and the billet is a totally building M.
Building M.
Different building, it's a new building that was constructed, or is it
The
existing?
billet grinder was in an existing building, and we removed all the skin from the building and replaced it with a sealed metal enclosure instead of just the sheet metal walls. So it's been completely redone, but it's not a new building.
And this is the only billet grinder you have at the facility?
Yeah, in building M, correct.
I mean, I know in building M, but
One.
only one billet grinder,
Only one.
basically. Okay. And so you're working at a solution for the control?
Yeah, correct. We thought we had the solution, we had installed it, and now they are basically, starting over with the engineering and a new vendor and new permitting. So it's just a lot of work.
So when you mention new permitting, and we can always ask Queen if when you leave, then you need to get new permits. That might be a delay in getting the revised permits and then getting the permit to construct. So the timeline could extend beyond the 45 days?
And if the 45 days that we requested was just to be able to have a schedule that we felt confident in based on the redesign and all the new permitting. So we believe we can have a redesign done, permits submitted, have a good feeling about the fire department in October, and then come to you guys at the end of October with a known end date.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Senator.
I'm concerned about the cascading effect. Let me just say, with the district, what does that mean? That you can't, at this point in time, specify completion date?
To the extent that question's directed at me, that is
Whoever
correct.
can answer.
Correct. At this time today, we cannot specify a final completion date, but we obviously know it needs to be, you know, we can't come here and ask you for 3 more years. So I get that, but the short answer to your question is correct.
What is likely to occur between now and the time that you might be able to define a completion date? What are some of the things that could go wrong?
Let's let Mr. Schran make sure that we have a witness with evidence, please. Can answer.
So to be clear, the concern we have between now and the hearing date is just to make sure that all the engineering is solid, make sure that the vendors are solid, make sure that everything is going to work out this time.
Was the district aware of the fact that of your uncertainty and what this would really meant in terms of time meeting the schedule before they stipulated to this?
I'm sorry, I guess.
Was the district aware of these problems that might be occurring, and then before they stipulated to these conditions?
Are you talking about the original
The
order
religious, yeah.
and the time frame in the original
Timeframe.
order?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm misunderstanding the question, I guess. Were they aware?
I'm not sure.
On this stipulated proposed order for abatement,
Yes.
that means the district has to agree and you have to agree, is that correct?
In the order for abatement,
Yeah. Stipulated.
I think the question is, the district stipulated to the original time frame in the order, is that correct?
I believe so.
Yes.
Well, the time frame has changed because of the cascading effect.
We're only certain that the time frame has changed for the billet grinder. We have concerns that it may for the other projects, but we don't know at this time.
Okay, now you have, just go through some of the other buildings. And they, based on the future configurations. Building P, that's on schedule.
The operation in Building P will actually get moved to a brand-new building, which is on schedule at this time.
But that's on schedule.
It is.
And you have Building H.
Building H will also get moved to the new building, which
I
is on.
understand, that's on
which is on-
schedule.
Yes.
Building M West,
M West is the one that we're here about today.
I know what this Building A1 is a different building from building,
That's different.
different, that's different.
Right, there are 3 different types of grinding operations, is that correct? Can you just re-explain to the board, just very briefly, the 3 different types of operations and what the order briefly is how it's addressing each one?
So titanium billet grinding is, like Mr. Bagalapalan explained earlier, it's a large grinder that grinds a titanium billet. That one is in Building M West. That project is completed with the exception of the dust collector. The entire rest of the project is done. The total enclosure, the makeup air units, all the doors, everything that was in this plan is done except that the dust collector failed.
And that's the one that you are here today
And that's the one we're here,
requesting the short, we'll call it a continuance, but essentially to move that date back by a month.
Correct.
Today, this here for Building A1 today.
Right.
That's not A1. That's M
That's what
West.
we're here for.
So
A1 is relates to building, it says.
The reason why you might be,
condition and 2
The
in
reason why you
Building
might-
A1.
the reason why you might be confused is because I had a question about A1 and condition number 2 based on the declaration that Mr. Schran filed with the hearing board. When I read it, I wasn't sure if they were in compliance with that condition, but that condition does not relate to the M West building and those billet grinding operations that we're here for today. It was just a
Understand.
question I had.
But we are discussing on page 14 of the stipulation, item 14, for Building A1 within 14 days. And they're going to explain, that's what they've been talking about. And to identify a condition 2 in Building A1. Condition 2 we're talking about, is that correct?
No, we were talking about condition 2 on page 14?
Yeah.
I wrote through it.
Page 14.
Okay, sorry. So what is the question?
That's what we're talking about, is that correct?
So we were here today to talk about the billet grinder, M West, and then she was asking me a question about A1.
The
What is
modification
condition-
request has
what-
nothing.
What is condition 2 related to?
Building
Which
A1.
building?
A1.
A1, that's what we're talking about, right?
The modification request is not with regard to building A1 or the operations in A1. The modification request for which the respondents are here today is to talk about the titanium billet grinding and the date by which they were supposed to be under total enclosure with negative air pressure and with the control system. But the control system failed, and they're asking for an extension of a month.
Some of the declarations I read talked about condition 2 in building A1. Is that correct, sir?
Correct, the
Well,
declaration
that's
did.
what, there may be other buildings involved, I don't know.
There are many buildings
I
involved.
understand that. I know there are many. I can see them right in the report.
Yes, sir. So the declaration was stating that we were in compliance with all other conditions of the order of abatement except the billet grinder. And then she had a question about condition 2. So that's
That's how condition 2 got introduced into the discussion.
correct.
Okay, but you got the future configuration, you have dates.
Yes.
You will be in compliance with those dates. If not, then what?
Our expectation is to be in compliance with those dates. If not, then we will come back to you guys to talk again.
I take notice of the fact that on page 15, the hearing board will have jurisdiction until August 31st, 2020. But with all these conditions to be met is uncertain, is it possible to go beyond that date?
Everything is possible, sir, but I don't believe at this time that we would go past August 31st, 2020.
And if you've, between now and then, Madam Chair, would we have additional hearings before the board?
I want to remind everyone that today we're being asked for a 1-month extension.
I know.
And so we will have another hearing on the 30th of October. So we'll have a lot more information at that time.
That satisfies me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Copeland, you have a question?
To expand on one of the questions that Senator Holden had about so you have 45 days to figure out, 30 additional days, 45 more days to figure out exactly how long it's going to take to construct the new system. And so I was curious a little bit more, like what's going to happen in that time period? You did answer that question and say that you guys were going to be checking the engineering. I imagine there's got to be. Are there other things that are going to be happening in that?
Yes, so we in the next 45 days, we hope to have selected a new dust collector manufacturer to provide the new pollution control device. Had gotten them within a contract, gotten the lead time of the equipment ready, finalized the design of the equipment, and hopefully have it on order and be submitted to the cities and to fire departments with permits. And that will, all of those things are what we need technically to have a schedule that we can present to you.
Okay, and so that includes applying for the permit then, too, so that process, not necessarily getting the permit, but applying for the permit and then, okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Schramm? Ms. Sue, did you have any questions? I didn't go to you at all.
I think Mr. Copeland asked the question I would have asked is what will happen in the next 45 days. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Copeland had a follow-up.
Sorry, one follow-up. The fire department, they have you submit a permit application to the fire department. I know how the AQMD works, but how does the fire department work? Same process?
Same process. We would submit them a permit application for the new. We submitted them a permit application for the old system, and they had approved that. But we have not submitted one because we haven't defined the new system.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Balagopalan.
Just a follow-up to Mr. Copeland, the issue with the fire department was the combustibility of the titanium dust, is that?
Correct.
And that's why they wanted a wet-dry system? is it?
Correct. The NFPA code specifically calls out titanium as a flammable and combustible dust and says that you must use a wet system unless the fire department approves the use of a dry system. So that's why we originally went with the wet system.
And you indicated that you're quite confident that the fire department will approve the dry system, or you're hoping that they will approve the dry system?
So since the wet system failed, Austin Company has re-engaged with the fire department and said, hey, the wet system that you guys approved didn't work. If we provide you this and this and this, would you, upon review of it, accept a dry system? And they said, yes, those are the things you'd need to provide, and then we should be able to accept the dry system.
Okay, thank you.
The wet system that failed, has it been used in other similar industry?
And back when we had the original hearing, one of the things that we talked about is that this was actually a custom built just for this application. The manufacturer said, this is the one you're gonna need. We haven't done anything like this before. This is custom made for you guys. So as far as we know, it had never been used before.
Okay. And just remind us, an application was submitted to the district reviewed it, the district granted the permit, correct?
Correct.
And so, in your mind, I mean, it sounds like it failed pretty monumentally.
Spectacularly, yeah.
And that was not foreseen by anyone who designed it, or by the district, or obviously not by
Not by us.
yourself.
The manufacturer seemed very confident. Austin Company seemed very confident. The permits were approved, and no, we couldn't have. We had no way to know that it would fail.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Schramm? Okay. Would anyone on the board wish to ask any other questions of any other witnesses who might be available and present? Okay. Oh, yes, Mr. Balagopalan.
I think she, because.
Did you want to put on your,
Sorry, I did have a question for Ms. Queen. Uchode, yeah.
Uchukwe? Is that?
Uchukwe, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schran. You may, I think we can allow Mr. Schran, if you need to go for your, for your flight. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you all.
Can he say that? We'll let you go.
Good morning.
Ms., can you please just state and spell your last name for the record?
It's Uchukwe.
Actually, it was on before.
Uchukwe, Uchekwe.
And did you take the oath today?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Uchukwe, I'll come back to the, I'll come back to the source test and what we'll need when you come back for the next hearing. On the system that is going to be redesigned, so will you be the one who will be submitting the permit application for the new control system
To the district?
to the district?
Yes,
And then you're a Title V facility, right?
correct,
So that'll have to go to EPA review for the modification?
correct.
So that time frame will be considered when you're asking for the extension for both the district approval of the permit and the EPA approval?
Correct.
Okay. Now, on the testing, so all the testing was conducted on the existing systems
Yes,
as per the order? And you have results from all the results of all the tests that was conducted on the existing system?
yes,
And that's something that you can provide at the next hearing, a summary at least, just for each one, what the grain loading was?
yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Ms. Uchukwe?
I just have a clarifying question because I want to make sure that the next hearing answers your question. Are you looking for a summary of all of the, like, for instance, demonstrating that the .02 grain was satisfied, for instance, and you're looking for that evidence to make sure. I just want to be clear so that we come back with a useful information next time. Okay.
Yes, that's correct, and that's for the existing system. I think the order required testing on the existing system before you do it on the new system. So just as a reference there. That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Uchikwai. Okay, at this time then, I'm going to ask if any member of the public wishes to be heard today on, I'm sorry, Ms. Sue, you don't wish to introduce any witnesses today?
No, I do not.
Okay. Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard today? I see no one. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Thayard if you'd like to give a closing statement.
Very briefly, I'm just very appreciative of the time that the district has spent on this with Ms. Sue and engineering staff as soon as we heard about this issue and the really, as Mr. Schran said, spectacular failure of a system that was designed to work and that has been millions of dollars have been spent on. We contacted the district. We had a meeting with them. I've been in touch with Ms. Sue a lot to work on these stipulations, and actually we're meeting after this to give her a status update as to where we stand. And I appreciate the hearing board's time, because I realize that our request for a 1 month, what is essentially a continuance, is a abnormal request. It is not a usual request. It is not lightly requested or given. And we did do that with a promise that we would come back on October 30th and provide you with a very detailed explanation of what's going on, the timelines we need, and hopefully the hearing board will be satisfied by that presentation. Other than that, I just request a 1 month extension of time as to the one condition with titanium billet, with a promise to come back on the 30th.
Thank you. And because we wanted to get in the testimony of Mr. Schran, I didn't ask who's representing or do any of that before we started. So for the record, Mr. Olivier Thayard, you are representing Weber Metals, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. And Ms. Daphne Sue, you are representing the executive officer today, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And also, I mentioned it at the beginning, but we did not actually make sure to do that. But Exhibits C and E, which are the declaration of Mr. Schran and the supplemental declaration of Mr. Schran, are in evidence. And Ms. Daphne Sue, if you would like to give a closing.
We heard testimony this morning that the facility is planning on using these next 45 days well, and will continue finding a solution for the air pollution control system. So the district has stipulated to the proposed order providing 30 more days, and then at that point in time, we will come back for another hearing while they will set forth a proposal regarding that center and system. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, would anyone like to begin deliberation with regard to good cause to modify the order for abatement that is stipulated to allow for the 1 month extension? I'm just trying to find the actual, what is it? It's 8F? Is that what you said? No.
It's
is it?
condition 15 little 4
Thank you. I was trying to find it.
is the exact condition.
15 little 4, okay, so
Or-
changing,
Or 15D, but I've seen it in a draft as
It's-
15 little 4, but it's actually 15D.
so okay, I'm seeing it on Exhibit G, it will be 15 Romanet 4, and the modification is to change the September 30th date to October 30th, 2019, with the understanding that we will be back for a hearing and that really is not the final date. And if not, I'll start the discussion. And I think there's good cause. I did have some questions, and I'm very thankful that the parties have come today to answer those questions. Mostly, I wanted to make sure that there was control for all of the 3 systems that are in place because it's important, given that it looks like there'll be quite a lengthy delay, at least with regard to the titanium billet grinding. So I am satisfied that the conditions of the order have been satisfied up to the present date. They are not yet in violation of 15 Romanet 4 because it's not actually technically due until September 30th. But we know they will not be because they actually were ahead of schedule, which is why I feel there's definitely good cause, because I do believe that Weber Metals has shown that they are serious about compliance. They were in compliance, they thought so, they would be in compliance very early of what was required under the order, and unforeseen to anyone, the new system, which was custom-made for them for this application, failed, as Mr. Schran said, spectacularly. So really what we're doing, as Mr. Thayard said, is granting a continuance so that they can get their ducks in a row and understand what is going on and what will be any cascading consequences, or at least what is a reasonable schedule moving forward for the titanium billet grinding. Anyone else have any thoughts? Mr. Balagopalan?
I agree, we can find good cause. I think when they found out that it wasn't working, they came forward to the district and highlighted the issue, and they're working for a solution. As also, as was indicated, they do have other configuration with a similar type of control system, so we might hear, I guess the cascading issue you're talking about, there may be similar problems maybe with the other systems that are also using the wet-dry combination. So we probably will hear more testimony regarding those and whether they need to seek an extension or modification of those systems at the next hearing also, in addition to the titanium, which is what is coming up very quickly by end of September. So, and they're asking, and I think it's not unreasonable to grant basically the extension from September 30th to October 30th for them to do the engineering and do the root cause analysis and finalize it, and then decide on the course of action they're going to take to come into compliance. We also heard testimony they have done most of what they needed to do, and they have enclosed the system. It's all been vented, and they put back the existing system, and actually, the previous actually showed that they complied with the grain loading from the existing system, the testimony we heard. So the minus the HEPA, it doesn't have the HEPA that is required by the rule, which reduce it even further. So I think in that regard, I think by going back to the old system that showed at least the grain loading compliance, they almost there in final compliance with the rule in that grinding area, but they'd need the time to look at alternatives. So I think I can find good cause and give in that extension to the end of October to come back and give a more definite date, to taking into account the permitting process, both at the district, EPA, the fire department, and then also maybe would like to hear at that time on the other systems, what cascading impacts they may have and whether they have to be modified or changed because of the failure of the wet-dry system.
Thank you. Anyone else? Senator?
Weber recognized that they're in a neighborhood that they could cause, with their operation, a lot of harm to the people who live there. Excuse me. You have residential, schools, and so on, within 500 feet of this facility. And yet, the particulates and the odor that's emanating from this plant has been hazardous for some time, inasmuch as it has been brought to the attention of Weber that they got to clean the mess up. They are on record spending, pledged to spend $13 million to that. That's quite sizable. To me, in my view, that's a good faith effort. And for that reason, we're allowed to grant them the additional time to comply with the rules and regulations as it relates to these violations. They got a lot of air pollution control systems that didn't bring them in, and that's what's going to be required when the job is finally completed.
Just to clarify, there is no, there are no odor complaints in this particular,
Say that again?
this matter was about the 6-month requirement in Rule 1430 to make sure, to construct the requirements of total enclosure, negative pressure, and the final air pollution control systems on the 3 different operations of grinding at the facility, and that they could not meet those. So just to be clear for the record,
It's
that's
clear to
why they
me.
were here.
It's
Okay.
clear to me what this issue is all about. However, because of 1430 in its entirety, that's why you're here, establishing these conditions. It relates to neighborhoods, et cetera, without me going into too much detail or specificity. I understand the problem very well, sir, and carry on in terms of fixing it.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else wish to add to the discussion? Okay, no. Okay, I'll make a, unless you would like to, Mr. Balagopalan.
Good cause, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think the matter of South Coast versus Weber Metals case number 6136-1, we can find good cause for the proposed modifications to the stipulated order abatement as presented in attachment, identified in attachment F with the strikeout version, with the following changes that we replace Ms. Cynthia Verdugo Peralta with Mr. Robert Copeland, who's sitting as the alternate. And I think that's the only change, basically.
It does say it was on consent calendar, so we should.
Oh, yeah, right, I had marked it, yes. Remove the consent calendar, and I don't believe there's any other changes. And so, and the change that was requested is from, highlighted on page 15, number 17, number 15, condition 15, changing from September 30th to October 30th to the upgrade to the titanium billet grinding. It's page 14, okay. I'm sorry, I was looking at 15, I was wrong. So with the only change is to the date, extending it by a month from September 30th to October 30th. I'm sorry, there was also a change which we can accept on the individual to be contacted at AQMD's change from Stephen Chang to Alan Wu. That's on page 15, condition 17
Of Exhibit F.
of Exhibit F.
There are 2 changes to that nature on page 15, one at the very top on line 1 and the other on line 24. We're talking about Exhibit F. Oh, and another
Actually, the 3, yeah.
on page 13, line 1 as well. And there is addition, well, I guess there's a change to some of the findings of fact. So starting on page 2, line 25. And then there's a change in the numbering. I think that's everything.
So basically, accept all the changes that was presented in attachment F with the correction to removing the consent calendar and also changing Ms. Cynthia Verdugo Peralta to Mr. Robert Copeland, and accept all the changes that is presented in attachment F.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we also need to put a hearing date?
That's
in
what
here?
thank you. I was going to second that and also ask if you'd like to set the hearing date, which I will do, for October 30th. And that's part of your motion?
Yes.
Okay, so we will set that date. So, well, we're going to set it anyway, but I'm going to second that motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Senator, how do you vote? Dr. Bernstein, how do you vote? Mr. Copeland, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Mr. Balagopalan votes,
Yes.
and so the motion passes 5-0. Thank you, and good luck, and we will see you on October 30th.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Is there any other business, board members? We are adjourned.